What would happen if the biological horrors of Resident Evil suddenly invaded the brutal world of the boys? A world where corporations already treated superpowers as profitable products and governments quietly experimented with human lives. What would happen when Vought discovered a virus capable of creating monsters without Compound V, while Homelander faced enemies that could survive wounds no ordinary human could endure? More importantly, what would happen when the people who had spent years fighting Umbrella's bioweapons entered a universe where one of the world's most powerful corporations was willing to weaponize them? The virus arrives. Our story begins in an abandoned Umbrella facility where a heavily damaged transport containing experimental T-virus samples is being moved through a restricted military zone. A containment failure suddenly occurs when the transport is attacked by an unknown force, destroying the vehicle and releasing several sealed biological specimens into the surrounding forest. The incident should have remained isolated, but one damaged sample is recovered by a private contractor working secretly for Vought. The corporation has spent years searching for biological alternatives to Compound V, and the recovered virus appears to offer exactly what they want. Within days, Vought scientists begin testing the sample beneath a secure laboratory in New York. The initial results are extraordinary. The virus rapidly repairs damaged tissue, increases physical strength, and appears capable of transforming ordinary humans into enhanced organisms without the long developmental process required by Compound V. Stan Edgar immediately recognizes its commercial potential. Vought believes it has discovered a new generation of biological weapons. Then the containment system fails. The first infected scientist collapses before suddenly transforming into a violent creature with abnormal strength and complete loss of human consciousness. Security teams attempt to contain the outbreak, but every casualty creates another infected host. Within minutes, the laboratory becomes a maze of blood, broken containment chambers, and mutated organisms. Vought seals the facility and orders every surviving employee to remain inside, hoping to erase the incident before the public discovers it. Above ground, Homelander arrives after receiving reports of an unexplained emergency. He expects another failed Vought experiment that can be eliminated quickly. Instead, he enters a dark laboratory filled with destroyed equipment and discovers creatures that continue moving after sustaining injuries that should kill any human. His heat vision burns through several infected bodies, but the virus has already created something capable of surviving extraordinary physical damage. Elsewhere, Billy Butcher and the boys intercept evidence of the outbreak and immediately recognize that this is not another Compound V disaster. The biological signatures match reports from a secret international weapons program known as Umbrella, a corporation infamous for creating viruses and monsters capable of destroying entire populations. Before Butcher can investigate further, the infection reaches the surface. New York begins experiencing unexplained attacks, emergency calls overwhelm police networks, and mutated creatures appear in crowded areas. Vought attempts to contain the information, but the outbreak is spreading too quickly. For the first time, the boys are not hunting soups, they are hunting an infection that can turn anyone into a monster. The outbreak becomes a war. Within hours, Vought declares several districts of New York under emergency quarantine while deploying the Seven to control the spreading panic. News networks describe the creatures as victims of a terrorist attack, carefully avoiding any mention of the stolen virus. Stan Edgar orders scientists to reproduce the infection while security teams search for a way to create a controllable version. Vought believes that if the outbreak can be stabilized, the virus could become a weapon more profitable than Compound V itself. The plan collapses almost immediately. The infected organisms begin mutating at unpredictable speeds, creating larger and more aggressive creatures that no longer respond to conventional containment methods. Some develop enormous claws and armored skin, while others gain extraordinary speed and regenerative abilities. Every attempt to destroy them creates new contamination risks. Vought's soldiers begin disappearing inside quarantine zones, and even several enhanced operatives become infected after coming into contact with contaminated tissue. Homelander initially treats the outbreak as an opportunity to demonstrate his superiority. He destroys entire groups of creatures in seconds, using heat vision and overwhelming strength to clear the streets. Yet the virus continues spreading through areas he cannot reach. Worse, some of the mutated organisms begin adapting to his attacks. Their bodies regenerate from devastating wounds. forcing Homelander to spend more time fighting creatures that should have been impossible to survive. Meanwhile, Butcher and the boys discover that they are not the only outsiders investigating the outbreak. A small group of experienced bioterrorism survivors has entered New York carrying information about the virus. Their knowledge comes from years of fighting Umbrella's experiments, and they quickly realize that Vought has made the situation far worse by attempting to weaponize the infection. Their presence gives the boys access to information that Vought has deliberately hidden. Deep beneath an abandoned Vought facility, Butcher discovers evidence that the original virus was not simply stolen. Vought had secretly purchased biological research from former Umbrella scientists months earlier, hoping to combine viral mutation with Compound V. The two substances had interacted in ways no one predicted, creating a hybrid infection capable of affecting both ordinary humans and soups. That discovery changes everything. A normal infected person can become a dangerous creature, but an infected soup can become something far worse. The hybrid virus amplifies existing powers while destroying the host's ability to control them. If Homelander himself were infected, the result could be powerful enough to destroy an entire city. Before the boys can warn anyone, a containment facility explodes. A massive mutated creature emerges from beneath Vought Tower, its body constantly regenerating as it tears through reinforced structures. Homelander attacks immediately, but the creature survives every assault and continues growing stronger. The boys watch from a nearby building as Vaught's greatest weapon struggles against a biological enemy that refuses to stay dead. Then Butcher realizes the terrifying truth: the creature is not the final stage of the virus, it is only the beginning. When soups become monsters, the hybrid outbreak spreads across New York faster than Vought can contain it. Hospitals become overwhelmed, military checkpoints collapse, and entire neighborhoods are abandoned as mutated organisms move through the streets. Vought attempts to maintain control by deploying every available soup, but the strategy creates an even greater disaster. Each enhanced soldier infected by the virus becomes a new biological weapon, combining supernatural abilities with uncontrollable mutation. The boys and the bioterrorism survivors establish a temporary command center inside an abandoned subway station. Their goal is no longer to expose Vought. It is to prevent the hybrid virus from escaping New York. Laboratory records reveal that the infection is evolving toward a final strain capable of spreading through the air. If that strain reaches the atmosphere, millions could become infected before anyone understands what has happened. Homelander remains the greatest obstacle. After hours of fighting, he begins showing the first signs of infection. His wounds regenerate too quickly, his eyes glow with unstable energy, and his emotions become increasingly difficult to control. Vought scientists secretly attempt to capture him, believing his infected biology could become the ultimate weapon. Instead, Homelander breaks containment and begins destroying everything around him. The virus has amplified his physical abilities. But it has also removed the restraint created by his public image. Without the cameras, without the audience, and without the need to pretend he is a hero, Homelander becomes more dangerous than ever. His uncontrolled heat vision cuts through buildings while mutated creatures swarm around him. Even the boys realize that killing him may be impossible once the infection reaches its final stage. Butcher refuses to let Vought create another weapon from the disaster. The boys infiltrate the central laboratory and discover a prototype antiviral developed from Umbrella Research. The treatment can stop the hybrid virus, but it requires genetic material from the original infected specimen. Obtaining it means entering the most dangerous area of the city, where the largest creatures have gathered around the source of the outbreak. The mission succeeds, but the virus has already reached its final phase. Vought's central laboratory begins broadcasting an automated signal designed to activate every infected organism simultaneously. Stan Edgar had intended to use the infected creatures as a controllable army. But the system now triggers a mass mutation instead. Buildings collapse as enormous biological organisms emerge from underground tunnels, while infected soups lose control across the city. Homelander reaches the laboratory at the same moment as the boys. He is visibly deteriorating, yet he remains powerful enough to destroy the entire facility. Butcher realizes that the only chance to stop the outbreak is to inject the antiviral directly into Homelander's bloodstream and use his body as the final test. The procedure begins as the city collapses around them. Homelander's infected body becomes increasingly unstable while the antiviral fights the virus at the cellular level. Outside the laboratory, thousands of creatures move toward the building, drawn by the same biological signal. Then the signal reaches its maximum strength. Every infected creature in New York begins converging on Vought Tower, creating one final battlefield where the boys, the remaining soups, and the world's most dangerous biological monsters are forced into the same fight. The last infection, the final battle begins beneath Vought Tower as thousands of infected creatures flood through the streets. Military forces fire everything they possess, but the mutated organisms continue advancing through explosions and collapsing buildings. The remaining members of the Seven attempt to protect evacuation routes while the boys race toward the central laboratory with the antiviral. Every minute matters because the airborne strain is approaching complete activation. Homelander stands at the center of the outbreak, barely maintaining control over his infected body. His veins carry the hybrid virus while his powers surge unpredictably. The creature inside him is no longer simply changing his body. It is attempting to rewrite his entire biology, turning the world's strongest soup into the perfect host for the final strain. Butcher and the others reach the laboratory and activate the antiviral system. The treatment begins spreading through Homelander's bloodstream, but the virus fights back by accelerating his mutations. His body becomes stronger, faster, and increasingly unstable as the infection reaches its final stage. Outside, the remaining heroes and the bioterrorism survivors hold the line against the infected army. Every creature destroyed creates another opportunity for the virus to spread, forcing them to focus on containment rather than elimination. The entire battle becomes a race between the antiviral and the mutation process. At the critical moment, Homelander finally loses control. The virus takes over his body, transforming him into an enormous biological version of himself with heightened regeneration and unstable energy output. He attacks everything around him, including the infected creatures that had once surrounded him. The battle tears through Vought Tower as Homelander becomes the most dangerous organism the virus has ever created. Butcher realizes that brute force will never defeat him. The antiviral must reach the original infection site inside Homelander's body before the mutation becomes permanent. Using the remaining laboratory equipment, the boys redirect the entire treatment system into one concentrated dose and inject it directly into Homelander. For several seconds, nothing changes. Then the mutation begins collapsing. The infected tissue burns away as Homelander's body returns to its original form. The virus loses its ability to reproduce, and the creatures across New York begin collapsing as their shared biological signal disappears. Within minutes, the outbreak finally stops, when the surviving authorities enter Vought Tower. They discover the truth hidden beneath years of corporate secrecy. Vought had purchased Umbrella Research, combined it with Compound V, and created the hybrid virus responsible for the disaster. The evidence is released worldwide, destroying the corporation's reputation and triggering international investigations. Homelander survives, but the experience leaves him with something he has rarely experienced before: genuine vulnerability. For the first time, he understands that even his body can become a weapon against him, and that there are enemies strength alone cannot defeat. The surviving members of the boys disappear before governments can claim credit for stopping the outbreak. The remaining antiviral samples are secured and the last contaminated facilities are destroyed, while the world begins rebuilding the neighborhoods that Vought abandoned. Far from New York, however, a sealed biological container sits inside an abandoned Umbrella laboratory. A warning light suddenly activates beside the frozen sample, revealing that not every trace of the hybrid virus was destroyed. Vought believed it could turn biology into a product. Umbrella believed it could turn infection into a weapon. The boys learned that neither corporation truly understood what they had created. In the end, the greatest danger was never the monsters themselves. It was the people who believed they could control them.